A little bit, but first I want to read something that's a little old, because I want to establish my credentials with you, that I'm qualified to talk about art. And so what I'm going to read to you from is a piece about the Vandalism Art Show, which was something I was involved in at a place called Space Cadets several years back. And this is that. And if Sinkway's mom showed up, this is for her. You can see her there. As close as most poor scam readers will come to the world of art is trying to sneak a bottle of wine into their backpack at some snooty gallery's opening night. But I remember how I got my big break and stormed the gates of big-time art like it was yesterday. I was at this warehouse in Miami that had art openings while some bands played, and I was puzzling over the stone doodlings of some kid who didn't have the sense to drop out of art school, like The Clash, when I thought, hey, I can do that, except I'll be drunk. And so the Vandalism Art Show was born. My goal was to finally get around to doing all the billboard alterations, spray paint attacks, and wheat pasting poster campaigns that I'd always meant to do in Miami, but I would do them all at once. I would do them in 2 weeks. I would do them and I would photograph all the evidence and present them in this art show while the stun guns played. Most of the artwork was about development. It was about the Publix phenomenon that I just spoke about. Every day it seemed like a rickety old wood Florida-style house was leveled to make way for a fluorescent pink or aqua-gated condo. Out of pure spite, I started spray painting no more ugly pink buildings on all the new ones. The question at the heart of this really was, do we, the people who live in a place all our lives, have any right to decide what our streets are going to look like? I thought so. So I made a stencil of a completely round circle. And at 4 a.m. I went to the new fluorescent yellow condo at Bird Avenue, where I spray painted big blue polka dots onto the outer wall of the yellow compound. It looked great. This was clearly an innovation. Instead of vandalizing per se, I was just redecorating. I thought the polka dots looked so cool that I was sure the owner would just leave them up. I envisioned an up from the streets art career for myself, like Keith Haring. Gritty street-level polka dot artist turns famous designer of tasteful polka dot houses. The MoMA would give me a show. I would shock the art world by putting polka dots on the outside of the museum. Well, I was wrong. When I went to get a photo at 9 a.m. the next morning for my show, they were already out there painting over my blue dots. Another sad shrine for the enemies of truth and beauty. Now, even though I spent all my night and day thinking of my artwork, I did not become a young starving artist for real until the dumpsters at Dunkin' Donuts on 79th and Biscayne were cruelly locked, cutting off 1/2 of my food supply. I went to work on one of my most ambitious pieces yet. I cut the locks to the dumpsters with bolt cutters, and I left a neatly typed note from, quote, the 79th Street Homeless Neighbors Association, which I taped to the dumpster, instructing the merchants that the, quote, association prefers that these dumpsters remain unlocked. It worked. They left the dumpsters unlocked after that. But this was all just building up to the project that almost put me over the edge, my installation at the Miami Shores Golf Course and Country Club. Now, wouldn't it be funny, I thought, late one night while riding home through the golf course, if you could somehow write, got any spare change, really huge, on the golf course, so that early next morning, the golfers would be forced to see and reckon with this question, got any spare change? But how would you do it? With a shovel, of course. In the little hill of grass where the sand trap at hole 9 was, I used a shovel to dig out the words, got any spare change, really huge, so that, because they were elevated, you could see them from hundreds of yards away. It was hard. It may have taken me 2 hours of digging out the sod at 10 p.m. on a Saturday, sweating profusely, and thinking, what in the hell am I doing? I still think many years later that this was quite possibly the strangest thing that I've ever done. But I did it as I did everything in those days, for art. For my final piece, I had my eye on this blank white billboard that it looked like it'd be easy to climb up on. It was right on Flagler coming into downtown. And there'd be a lot of traffic there all day to read anything that you wrote on it. What could you write there, though? I figured any sort of political slogan that you wrote would be sort of lost in the ongoing traffic, or maybe even that like folks passing by maybe like wouldn't be speaking English and maybe wouldn't get it. So I was trying to think like free Mumia. It seemed like it would be kind of feeble. It wasn't going to work. So what the billboard called out for, I thought, was something really huge that would capture the city's imagination. Something big, like when that freak wrapped all those islands in Biscayne Bay and we were made of plastic. What that blank billboard called out for, I decided, was a huge full-color, 15-foot-tall penis. Now, I wasn't sure if this was even possible, but then Chuck Luce told me at his work he had access to a machine that could take an image and print it out on 32 big pieces of paper so that when the paper was assembled, it would look like one huge image. Now all I needed was the perfect photo. I asked Sir Robert to find me one of his pornos that had pictures of dicks in it. He vehemently denied owning any such pornos. Nevertheless, a week later, he presented me with a crude porno mag that he had, he said, quote, stolen from Borders. The porno had most of the usual unimaginable filth in it, but then near the middle, I found it. The perfect penis for the billboard. Its gentle curve suggested the lines of Miami's famous Art Deco architecture style. The visible veins brought to mind Miami's tangled mess of freeways. The hardness of the erection seemed to invite comparisons to the confidence and aggression in the forms of the skyscrapers in the new financial district. Yet it also mocked their ambition, as if to say, you can't keep it up forever. Most tellingly, the penis itself pointed to nowhere, calling to mind the lack of a city center in Miami's vast, increasingly faceless urban sprawl. Yes, this dick was art. Now I was ready to go to work. But like the production of many great works of art, there was a cloud of doom hanging over the creation process. While working on the project, I broke my collarbone in a freak bike accident, this is true. And I had to complete the piece with my right arm immobilized in a sling. I was forced to rely heavily on my art assistant, Cinque, as well as copious amounts of cyanide special brew, the only thing that would dull the horrible pain. Nonetheless, with art immortality in my sights, I enlisted George Kelly as our getaway driver, and the night before the show we headed out to the billboard at 1 a.m. Everything went wrong. First of all, when we actually assembled the paper that Chuck had given us, the penis was only about 3 feet tall. Certainly big for a penis, but hardly the grand statement we'd envisioned. Then we got to the billboard and it was no longer blank. The billboard was now covered with a cigarette ad and the ad was in Spanish, and we weren't sure if the penis would be funny on this ad. The wheat paste was making the pages soggy and we had to struggle to keep them from ripping. Then we realized that the pages were out of order. We weren't sure if we knew how to get the dick back together. It was an ugly scene. We finally decided to put the penis up on the blank wall under the billboard. So Cinque leaned precariously off the edge of the bridge railing, gluing up the pages, hoping we were getting it right, while I yelled instructions and motioned with one good arm. Then Cinque fell off the bridge. Luckily, it was only 4 or 5 feet down into a thorn bush. He was only bleeding slightly as I helped pull him up as best as I could and we finished the job. Back at the car, our getaway driver, George, was snoring heavily. But he woke with a startled yell when we got in. "Hey, I thought you guys were the cops!" He yelled. The whole thing seemed like a disaster. If only I'd been able to get an NEA grant to do this, I thought disgustedly. Then I'd at least be famous like that guy who got paid by the government to pee on crucifixes. But still, driving by it on our way home, you could see that it really was a big penis. It actually was sort of unnerving, just hanging there like that. It had a certain shock appeal. I could see Cuban exile groups blaming its appearance there near Little Havana and the usual agents of Castro. The next day I got the photos all developed and copied and put up at the Space just minutes before showtime. People seemed to like it, but I didn't even care what people thought anymore. I was just glad that my art career was over so I could relax and get drunk at the punk show. But wouldn't you know it, the punks had already snuck off with all of the opening night bottles of free wine.